GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate.
From all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
Make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel.
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask. So why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for...
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good afternoon, it's just gone at 3 o'clock. I'm Simon Pusey in the GB newsroom. The war in Ukraine has dominated the Conservative Party's spring conference, with the Prime Minister saying Russia's president launched the invasion because he fears a free and democratic nation as his neighbour. Boris Johnson told the Tory faithful Vladimir Putin is panicking about the prospect of a revolution in Moscow.
He was frightened of Ukraine because in Ukraine they have a free press, and in Ukraine they have free elections. And with every year that Ukraine progressed, not always easily, towards freedom and democracy and open markets, he feared the Ukrainian example, and he feared the implicit reproach to himself. Because in Putin's Russia, you get jailed for 15 years just for calling an invasion an invasion. And if you stand against Putin in an election, you get poisoned or shot.
Boris Johnson there. The Defence Secretary, Ben Wallace, told GB News Russia needs to be judged by its actions, not by its words.
As the Prime Minister said, the problem is if he's successful in Ukraine, it won't stop there, because in his own articles and speeches, he effectively lays claim to the Baltic states and other parts of what was either once the former Russian Empire or the Soviet Union. And I think it's really important people understand that when you have a president who writes and speaks like he does about sort of ethnic nationalism, and that he has sort of rights over them, then we should all worry for our own security. It's that type of language that led to the Second World War.
In Ukraine, the prosecutor's office says 112 children have been killed since the start of the Russian invasion. In the east, the governor of Luhansk says a humanitarian corridor is being opened for residents trying to evacuate the region. Meanwhile, President Volodymyr Zelensky is calling for face-to-face talks with his Russian counterpart, telling Vladimir Putin it's time for comprehensive and meaningful negotiations.
I want everyone to hear me now, especially in Moscow. The time has come for a meeting. It is time to talk. The time has come to restore territorial integrity and justice for Ukraine. Otherwise, Russia's losses will be such that it will take several generations to recover.
In other news, Syria's president has made his first trip to an Arab state since the war began in his country 11 years ago. Travelling to the United Arab Emirates, President Bashar al-Assad met Abu Dhabi's Crown Prince Sheikh Zayed Al Nahyan in a sign of strengthening ties between the two nations. The US has reacted, saying it's disappointed and troubled by the apparent attempt to legitimise the Syrian leader. 4 people on board a US military aircraft have died following a crash in northern Norway. The country's Joint Rescue Coordination Centre confirmed the Marine Corps aircraft was taking part in a NATO military exercise when it went missing. The government is being urged to publish the legal advice it received on whether P&O Ferries broke the law when it sacked its staff. Labour is asking if there are legal moves ministers could take to reverse the decision. 800 employees were fired without consultation via a pre-recorded message on Thursday. And the former British Airways chairman, Sir Martin Broughton, says that his group has global backing for its Chelsea Football Club bid. 3 groups at the moment are vying for the club, which was put up for sale by Roman Abramovich after he was sanctioned by the government for having links to Vladimir Putin. The Chelsea Supporters Trust says positive discussions are being held with the prospective new owners. British property developer Nick Candy and Chicago Cubs owners, the Ricketts family, have also submitted bids. TV, online and DAB Plus radio, this is GB News. We'll have more news at the top of the next hour. Looking ahead to this evening's weather, and the UK is looking dry and clear, though turning chilly and remaining windy in the west. Let's take a look at the details. After a sunny but windy day in the southwest this evening, winds will ease, but it will turn a little cloudier across the south, clearer in the north, but feeling cooler. In the southeast, it will be a breezy end to the day, but cloudless skies will continue, still feeling cooler in the breeze along the coast. Moving over to South Wales, where we can expect this evening to be dry and fine, but breezy still and chilly off sunset. Now moving north to the Midlands, tonight will be dry with clear skies, though over the hills and in the east a fresh breeze will continue to bring a colder feel. Moving on to northeast England now, breezy on the hills this evening, but clear and dry for all. There could be the odd spot of fog in the valleys, and it will continue to feel cold. Across southern Scotland, it will also be a clear and dry night with the odd misty patch. However, over hills it will turn increasingly windy this evening. Finally, to Northern Ireland, a windy but clear evening. So if you are planning on enjoying the last of the sunshine here, you'll likely need a layer or two. For many, it will remain clear overnight with a touch of frost by the morning, but cloud will increase in some western areas. And that is how the weather is shaping up overnight into tomorrow morning.
The bell has rung, the GB News Tavern is open, and I'm joined tonight by Sir Lyall-Grant, former senior diplomat and National Security Advisor. Sir Mark, welcome.
Thank you.
To Talking Pints and GB News.
Good evening.
Now, you joined the diplomatic service many years ago. How does that happen? How does one do this?
Well, it happened a little bit by accident for me, to be honest, because I did law at university and I qualified as a barrister, and I was called to the bar. And at the same time, just for the fun of it, because I was one of these sort of guys who likes taking exams, I took the Foreign Office exams. I'd thought of doing that at university, but I broke my hand just before and couldn't do them. So when I was in London doing the bar exams, I thought I'd take the Foreign Office exams. And I think because I wasn't really ever intending to join the Foreign Office, I managed to get through the exams and the process and was offered a job. And they were offering me the princely sum of £5,000 a year.
I'm just thinking, if you've just been called to the bar, you could have made quite a lot more money if you stayed in law.
Certainly would have made a lot more money, but not initially. And I'd done a postgraduate course in Brussels in EU law. And so I was 24, I was still dependent on my parents. And the Foreign Office was offering sort of instant independence, rather than at the bar in those days, you weren't paid for the first sort of couple of years. Yeah. Although, of course, in the end, you would have earned a lot more money.
Yeah, yeah. So the Foreign Office it was. And I guess, you know, I mean, of course, I worked in Brussels for years and I've interacted with the Foreign Office. It's not always been that, well, it's always been civil. We may not have agreed on much, but it has always been civil, actually, as it should be. But one looks at the Foreign Office, it's a very elitist organisation, isn't it? Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
I think it was at one point, and certainly in my intake, the sort of graduate intake was all white and it was all male. But that has changed very significantly. And now I think the 10 most senior ambassadorial posts overseas are held by women.
Right.
And there's a lot of senior officers from ethnic minorities as well. So, no, it's a very much more diverse organisation than it was when I joined 40 years ago.
And to get into the Foreign Office, you've got to pass that exam still.
It's an open exam, and everyone can apply. It's an online exam at the first stage, and they whittle that down from, say, 60,000 down to sort of a couple of thousand, and then there's various exercises and interviews and things like that. So it's rigorous, but it is completely open, and anyone can apply.
Fair enough. And you've worked...
Have to be a British national.
I hope so. You've worked all over the world, postings in Pakistan and goodness knows where else. So you obviously care deeply about all those places that you've been to. You also served at the United Nations. I'm guessing that the last few years must have been quite a trauma for you, really, because the course that was set in terms of our membership of the evolving European Union, the belief in quite big globalist structures, it's been fractured in quite a big way, hasn't it, by the Brexit vote, by a much bigger debate. And I'm thinking that perhaps one of the impacts from the Russian invasion of Ukraine is we genuinely will start thinking more about energy independence, for argument's sake, a point that I was just debating earlier in the show. We'll rely far less on global just-in-time supply chains. There's going to be a change of thinking towards much more of a national perspective.
Yes.
And that is a challenge for a Foreign Office that's been set on a particular route for decades.
Well, you're right in one way that I joined in 1980, and there's been 3 seminal events really since then. The Falklands War was absolutely seminal in allowing Margaret Thatcher to have the time to turn around the British economy, and it fundamentally changed most diplomats' career from potentially managing decline, as everyone talked about in the 1970s, to suddenly representing a country that meant something that had a lot of influence. Then you had the fall of the Berlin Wall, obviously absolutely critical. And the third one was, certainly for the United Kingdom, was Brexit. And that has changed a great deal. But interestingly, although personally I think it's a strategic mistake, mainly for economic reasons, that's my personal view, I have always said, and I've said this publicly, and I said it at the time, that in terms of Britain's influence in the world or its national security, there is no reason why Brexit per se should damage either of those two things. And I can explain why, if you like.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking about that because I'm quite struck, and I'll sort of throw this back at you for a second. I'm quite struck that in terms of foreign policy, over the course of the last decade, well, 15 years probably, we were getting closer and closer to a European position. It was a European position on Zimbabwe. It was a European position on Putin and Russia. We weren't speaking independently as a country. And I only, please disagree with me, but I kind of feel that the AUKUS deal with Australia, actually the Ukraine, where, and whatever one thinks of Boris Johnson's leadership on other aspects of domestic life, but actually, when it comes to the Ukrainian issue, and whether they got it right or wrong is irrelevant, in the sense that they actually were quite decisive, quite out there, giving leadership, and in a sense, it was America. I felt it was America and the European Union following the lead that we were giving. So doesn't this kind of show, you did say that your principal reason for wishing to stay was economic.
Yeah.
And we could debate that forever, but we're just not going to. But actually, aren't we already beginning to gain a bit more self-confidence on the world stage with Brexit in terms of foreign policy?
I think it's a bit early to come to that conclusion, but certainly, and I was in New York as ambassador to the UN at the time of the Scottish referendum, there's no doubt in my mind that Scottish independence would be much more damaging both to our security and to our international standing than Brexit ever could be. I mean, you're right to some extent, I think, to say that we have greater autonomy now, we have more opportunity to set out our own positions. But what we've lost is the ability to influence the EU positions. Because without us,
they never listened
the EU,
to us, did they?
Oh, well, you would be surprised how much influence we had, particularly in the foreign and security area, because we were the biggest defence spenders in Europe. We had a huge clout as alongside the French. And we had huge clout on things like competition and open trade alongside the Northern Europeans. So without us, the risk is that the European Union will shift its position. We won't necessarily shift our position. Some people say we'll get closer to the Americans. I don't think we will. I think our position is our position, but the Europeans will move further away from the Americans without us. And
Yes.
that is why the Dutch and the Swedes and the Poles are so upset at us leaving.
Do you think the EU will be there in 10 years' time?
I think it will. I think there's a huge political impetus behind it.
I know that.
Fundamentally it is fundamentally
Having fought against
a political process, and the political will between France and Germany in particular, because of the history, is so strong that it will survive. Absolutely sure.
Well, we'll see. I'm sure it'll be. If it does survive, it's going to have to adapt and change. Now, after your stint over on Second in Manhattan, National Security Advisor. I mean, a heck of a job.
Yeah.
To take on, and amazing job to have. And yet, your time there was a time when we began to see a rise of extremist Islamic terrorism.
Yep.
We began to see, I think, actually, for the first time in many, many years, some genuine fear. You know, do we get the tube train or in London or don't? I mean, that sort of thing was happening. And yet, and it was, you know, sort of count our chickens, but there have in the last few years, been surprisingly few of these attacks. Is that evidence that our intelligence services are on top of this? I mean, they can never be totally on top of it, I get, but are we kind of on top of this?
I wouldn't come to that conclusion exactly. I think what is evident is that we went through a period of very extreme terrorist attacks, Islamist mainly terrorist attacks, and also rising cyber attacks. And what is interesting about those two threats, as opposed to, say, the threat from Russia or the threat from China, is that the government cannot really 100% keep its people safe. It can do a lot, and the government has done a lot, and we did a lot when I was there in terms of reinforcing the intelligence services, better coordination between law enforcement and intelligence, setting up the National Cyber Security Centre for the first time to help business. So there's a lot the government can do, but the reality is that if an individual takes a knife, goes out in the street, starts stabbing people, off the radar, as it were, there is very little the government can do to do it. And that's why I think there was a time when the sense of personal insecurity went up in this country, despite the fact, in a strategic sense, the country has never been safer.
And yet, I think people got more upset with those that committed terrible atrocities, London Bridge being one example, where some of these people were known already to the authorities. And that led to a feeling, well, hang on, if we know about these people, why aren't we doing more?
Well, because we know now about a lot of people, and you can't put everyone under 24-hour surveillance, which is extremely resource intensive. Therefore, you have to make choices the whole time. And MI5 are making choices the whole time about where are the priority threats. Most of the time, they get it absolutely right. As you rightly say, there have been very few terrorist attacks, deadly terrorist attacks in the UK in recent years, mercifully. And something like 30 really quite developed terrorist attacks have been thwarted in the last 4 years. And that is a sign that you can never say you're on top of it, because it's a continuing threat and it won't go away in our generation. That is for certain. But nonetheless, I think the government has the right approach to it.
650 people have crossed the English Channel in dinghies in the last 2 days. Haven't got the numbers yet. It'll be 90% young men. They'll be between 16 and 28. None of them will have a passport. We won't have a clue where any of them come from. We won't know whether they genuinely are fleeing something awful or whether they were fighting for ISIS 2 or 3 years back. How concerned should we be about that?
The numbers are still relatively small, and we mustn't lose sight of that perspective.
Well, have a look at this. This is today's, Sir Mark, and you know, we now learn that the figure for last year has been revised upwards to nearly 30,000. Estimates this year, it could be 60,000. It's quite a lot of people.
It's quite a lot of people, but look, there's been 1 million in Germany. There's hundreds of thousands in France and in Spain and in Italy. So we are relatively well protected because of our geographical position from these inflows of illegal migrants.
It doesn't feel like it.
It may not feel like it to some people, but the reality is that we need a lot of immigration, legal immigration. This illegal immigration needs to be stopped. But the real problem is, where is it stopped? And in my view, the French government have not always done as much as they should do, because those who are fleeing from France to the UK cannot claim that they're coming from an unsafe environment to a safe one, because they're perfectly safe.
And that
in France,
principle,
they want to come. And that principle of the first country of refuge is being breached all over the place. And you can understand why, because southern European countries are saying, well, just by accident of geography, we are getting the vast majority, and you in Britain or Netherlands, say, or Sweden are not getting as many, and you should share the burden. And this was a great problem for us when we were in the European Union. We opted out from the Schengen Agreement precisely so that we could keep some control of it. But it's caused huge problems in the rest of the EU with people arguing about who should take what. And of course, the migrants want to go maybe to Germany because that's a place where you can get a well-paid job, or they might want to come to the UK because they've got relatives or friends in the UK.
Well, I think it's called the benefit system, isn't it? And I think our benefit system is very much more generous than they're going to get in any other European country. And all the while, and also, the fact that we don't really deport anybody anymore. There are lots of reasons why. I just wonder, sort of finally thinking the really big picture of what's going on. Was NATO expansion, continual NATO expansion to the east, was it a mistake?
No, I don't think it was a mistake. I mean, one forgets the trauma that many of these countries went through before 1989. Suddenly the Berlin Wall fell down. They had the opportunity to join institutions that they wanted to join, and many wanted to join NATO. Most of them, in fact. And the European Union.
I get that.
And NATO is a completely defensive alliance. And when President Putin claims that he feels threatened by NATO, this is rubbish. This invasion of Ukraine is all about protecting the Putin rule, Putin regime, and as part of what he considers, to coin a phrase, if you'll excuse the phrase, to make Russia great again. That's what he wants. He wants to put back the old Russian Empire.
No, because he does.
It's nothing to do with security.
Of course he does. I mean, look, 7 or 8 years ago, I was saying in the European Parliament, I thought we would provoke him into war. Doesn't justify in any way what he's done. How does this end, do you think? How do you sort of, looking into the crystal ball, at least there are some negotiations going on, the Russian military having a tougher time. What's the way out of this?
Well, Putin is going to lose, undoubtedly. But unfortunately, that does not mean that Ukraine will win. I mean, Ukraine has lost massively already. Tens of thousands of civilians killed, cities destroyed, millions of refugees. It's horrendous. But I think President Zelensky has been quite sensible and statesmanlike in what he said in the last couple of days, that all conflicts end in some form of agreement. And he's right about that. And therefore, these talks are a way out. Quite what the terms of that agreement will be and how long this conflict will last is virtually impossible to predict at this stage.
It is. So, Mark, we may disagree on many things with worldview. We've had a very civilised conversation here on Talking Pints, and thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel.
Right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and every weekday we bring you The Briefing live from 9:30 a.m. The stories, analysis and live debate that you need to hear.
Quite right, Tom, of course.
Was this something that had been considered at all?
Difficult to answer.
Gas-guzzling helicopters circling. Noise is being made here. Joe Biden walking out. Thank you very much for joining us. Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, Monday to Friday, 9:30 a.m. on GB News.
Join me, Gloria De Piero, Monday to Thursday at noon for The Briefing. We go to the parts of Parliament that you won't see elsewhere. Plus, there's exclusive interviews with MPs from all parties.
But quite often, they paper over the real truth. Why does a working class lad like you join the Tories?
That's a good question.
Don't miss it, Monday to Thursdays at noon on GB News.
It's always my favourite part of the show. It's Talking Pints. I'm joined by Dave Watson. Dave, thank you, mate, for being with us here in Dudley. You live just down the road. Now, look, Scots Guards, been in your family, and there you are. You're 18 years old. You're a Scots Guardsman. Boots polished up like glass. And you're on ceremonial duty at Buckingham Palace.
I am.
How good did that feel?
It were life-changing, because when I was a young lad and I've been to London, I didn't think them guys were the military, you know what I mean? I didn't see that side of the military until I joined, and then I realised it was the military there.
And actually, one of the best sales points for Britain.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I mean, you know, foreign visitors come, they see the guards on duty at the Royal Palace and they think, wow, I mean, these guys are impressive.
My photos all over the world.
Yeah, and you got to know the royal family doing it.
I did.
And I'm told, rumour has it you danced with the Queen. That can't be true.
I did dance with the Queen, yeah.
Now that is pretty amazing. That was how your soldiering career began, but of course the Guards, fighting regiments, always have been for centuries, and you're off to Afghanistan, you're off to Helmand. There aren't many of our generation that actually know what it must feel like to be heading off to a real war. What was it like heading out there?
It were all right at first, but it were when we got on that flight flying over there, and that's when it become real. And especially when you're leaving your families behind.
Yeah.
Because you don't know whether you're going to come back or you don't know whether you're going to be seeing them again. So that's what's the scary part. And then when you get over there, that's when it hits you.
And you were out on patrol, and you had the deep misfortune. It wasn't just you; it happened to lots of people. Of stepping on an IED. Do you remember much of it?
I remember everything. I remember it like it was yesterday. Yeah.
Do you really?
But the doctors and that what were there, they said because of the size of me, I was 6'1", and I were pretty built, and with the size of me, that's how I survived, and that's how I coped. If it happened to someone that was smaller than me, they wouldn't have had a chance.
I mean, the extent of your injuries was massive, obviously. I mean, how do you? I mean, I've been through very bad road traffic accident, plane crash. I've had bits of me broken and all sorts of things. Nothing like you've been through. But you sort of think when you're recovering from these things, was I really unlucky, or was I really lucky? It's a really difficult one. How did you deal with all of that?
Well, at first, you feel like you're unlucky, but then you come to hospital, and you're in your ward, and the reason that I become lucky was there were a guy next to me, a young lad, younger than me, missing both his legs, a few fingers, and he was blind as well. So he was worse off than what I were. And then it's when you go to Headley Court, that's when you see all the injuries, and you realise how lucky you are. And if this didn't happen to me, I wouldn't have met my wife, I wouldn't have had my kids, and I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now. So this happening to me is the making of me.
It's just amazing to see that positive mental attitude, and actually quite inspiring, I think. I mean, it really is inspiring. I'm here with Fleet Street legend and columnist Garry Bushell, but before I show him, he is an Englishman through and through, proud to be English, a man that wants St George's Day to be a public holiday. Let's hear a little bit of Garry Bushell on England.
European? Never. I was born English and I will die English. To be English is to be part of the world's richest culture. From this sceptred isle sprang talents as diverse as Kipling, Chaplin, Dickens, Shakespeare, Nelson and Joe Strummer.
Garry Bushell,
Nigel,
welcome to Talking Pints.
How long ago was that? That was a much younger man.
Well, it was a younger Garry Bushell, but I don't think the sentiments have changed at all, have they?
Not at all. I mean, I feel very passionately about England and the fact that we're probably the only country in the world where we're not supposed to be proud of who we are and we can't celebrate St George's Day. It's some terrible sin if we do that.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Because we've got St Patrick's Day coming up.
Yeah.
Thursday of this week, and down at Cheltenham, they'll all be going mad and celebrate. And there'll be parades in New York.
But somehow, I think it's been a problem ever since George Orwell wrote about it in the 30s. That a certain type of English intellectual has a snobbery about a dislike of their own country and a snobbery about anyone who celebrates. We're not saying that we don't like other people. We just say we've got a culture. Why can't we enjoy it?
It's funny, you know, I've watched for sort of 30, 40 years, the BBC particularly. I know you love the BBC. But, the BBC almost being champions of, you know, Irish nationalism.
Yes.
Scottish nationalism, Welsh nationalism, but any hint of English identity, and oh my God.
Look at the Queen Vic, Nigel. The Queen Vic, over these years, they've had special days for Diwali, they've had special days for the American Independence Day.
Yep.
St George's Day, sometimes they have a flag up. Once they had it as a storyline when it was an Alfie Moon Con. But the rest of the time, it's just, we can't have that. The idea that it's the only pub in East London that doesn't have anyone who's celebrating St George.
Gary, you're still writing columns. You're doing Star, Sunday Express, all sorts of things that you do. You've been in Fleet Street for decades.
I have.
You've written for every tabloid paper.
Pretty much, yeah.
You've written millions of words.
Yeah.
I was keen to talk to you. Your time on The Sun, in the 80s on The Sun.
I remember my first day, Nigel. I remember going up there, and I'd never been in a newspaper before. I'd come from the rock press, the music press. And Nick Ferrari on that first day gave me a guided tour of the Sun building. And the bizarre desk, the showbiz desk, was on one floor and the news desk was underneath. And he took me down and there was this man effing and blinding and hollering like some mad tramp, pointing and jabbing at the news desk. I said to Nick, who's this fella? That's the editor, he said.
Kelvin McKenzie.
That was Kelvin. The wild, mercurial, brilliant and sometimes dangerous Kelvin McKenzie.
Now, Kelvin sat in that seat a few months ago on this segment.
Yeah.
And I said to him, Kelvin, you were a tyrant. And he said, yes.
Of course it was, yeah.
I mean, Fleet Street, it must have been, for all its faults, it must have been enormous fun in those days.
It was incredible fun. I mean, that very first day, Nick took me to the Printer's Pie pub, and I was in the company of David Banks, who we just lost, and Nick and David Hancock, and it was so funny, and they were so quick, and I thought, how on earth can you keep up with people like this?
No, it was amazing, actually.
But for all the stick the Sun got, we did some really good things. I mean, I did that, I don't know if you remember, we did Ferry Aid. We raised £1 million for the survivors of the Zeebrugge ferry. Had fantastic people involved in it. Paul McCartney did a little video for us. It was, we did achieve things. And I've looked back at that time, just for me being a selfish, I suppose, but I had some of the funniest times of my life, not least the Freddie Starr incident, which is always brought up whenever...
Oh, share it with us.
Oh, you don't know?
Share it with us.
I got invited down by my late friend Dale Winton, said, come to this show, you'll be fine. I thought, all right, I'm not sure about that, it's Freddie Starr. Well, I get there and I knew it wasn't going to be fine, because I'm sitting one side, Dale's on the other, and I'm targeted, and Garry, and he came for me, and I ended up tied up, blindfolded and strapped to a wall. And I, not knowing the trick, I actually thought he was throwing knives at me, which is terrifying. At one stage, he tried to undo my trousers. I thought, I'm not having that. No one needs to see these.
But no, the fun that, But when you think about it, Garry, the newspapers that you were in for years, columnists would have very strong opinions.
Yes.
Express them clearly, and kind of, you could agree, you could disagree, but it was all part of our democratic process.
It definitely was, and there was no attempt to control thought. I mean, to be honest, as a boy, the first thing I remember reading in newspapers was Keith Waterhouse in the Daily Mirror and Sir John Juna, who my uncle worked in the oil plant down at Greenwich, but he used to have the Sunday Express. And I remember reading John Juna thinking, this is great writing. And you're right, now the debate is more controlled.
Yeah.
And I think we've allowed ultra-militant crackpot minorities to dictate the national debate and actually control the cultural debate, which is not a very good thing, not very healthy for the country.
So the internet arrives.
Yeah.
And the newspaper, well, the physical sales of newspapers decline, but hey, newspapers online. So still, these big titles are very important. Has the internet helped democracy?
I mean, it's certainly... It's a double-edged sword, isn't it? Because for all the fact that it opens up and people can find out more for themselves and see other views, it has spread a lot of nonsense and the fake news and the conspiracy theories.
It is a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
It really is. Gary, the other great thing that music, of course. From the 70s.
Yes.
You were involved with all sorts of groups, some of which were completely unknown and went on to do great things, and some didn't.
And some were Ozzy Osbourne, yeah. I mean, I think the very first review I did for Sounds in the summer of 1978 was The Specials, and it was the first gig they ever played as The Specials, because that morning they'd been to Coventry Automatics, and that night they opened up for The Clash at Aylesbury Friars, and that was just fantastic.
British music now, and over the last few years, I go to America a lot, and we may get McDonald's, and we might get Starbucks, and we might get a lot of American telly, but British music is incredibly strong.
Huge, and people love it out there, and the fans are less cynical, I find, than we tend to be over here. They just seem more open to the music, and they genuinely love everything.
I mean, it really is a big export for us, isn't it?
Massive export, yeah.
I think people underestimate it, Gary, you were on the telly. I'm going to show a clip.
Go on.
Of Bushell on the telly in the 90s. Have a look at this, folks.
I like this Most Haunted with that Derek Okora, but have they actually ever caught any ghosts on camera?
No, never.
They must be ever so good at hiding.
You can't be swimming today, then, Fred?
No, I'm still knackered from going yesterday.
Oh, how far did you swim?
Only a mile, but I didn't think I was going to make it.
No?
The last 300 yards were the hardest. They were over dry land.
Maybe the tide had gone out.
10 years ago, I told Swampy all this was going to be a bypass. It's all right, mate, you can come down now, it was a wind-up.
Now, we struggled with Bushell on the box, Gary. We struggled to find the clean bits.
Nigel, if my chest was see-through, you see a broken eye. I can't believe you said that. No, we had such a lot of fun.
But it was racy stuff, wasn't it?
Mm. Well, and you think we were doing a half-hour show? I was pretty much writing it every week, casting it every week, and just getting people in. We had such a laugh. 50 shows we did, #1 on the Night Network. We had some amazing guests. We had everyone from Lily Savage to Bernard Manning on that.
And telly now, there are more and more channels.
Yes.
And there's less and less to watch.
Oh, there is. That's right. I mean, I'm at home and it's like the deck of the Star Trek Enterprise. You've got Amazon, you've got Instagram, you've got all these different things, hundreds of choices. But what do you want to... I mean, if you find something and you enjoy it, that's the great thing. And when you actually find that one thing you can consume.
Yeah, no. So you've done it all. Newspapers, television, the music world, very long career, English champion, all of those things. And I know that you were a big Brexit believer and support, and we've known each other a long time.
Ever since I was in the socialist work, well, international socialist as a teenager, we were anti the EU. I never saw any reason to change that.
But you're not an international socialist now, are you?
No, but I tell you what, in my heart, I think I'll always be a socialist. But in my head, libertarian probably. It's a battle between the two major organs, and the head normally wins.
Well, as long as we confine the topic to those two organs, the debate will be okay.
I wouldn't dream of pushing you over there. Not at this time of day, no.
But where are we, Gary? We got Brexit, which was a hell of a struggle. We won a referendum, they tried to stop us, but we got there in the end.
A lot down to you.
Well, I did my bit. Where do we go now? Because I look at Keir Starmer, who's kind of middle of the road, sort of social democrat.
A man who doesn't even know what a woman is.
Yeah, what do you think about that?
I just think it's weird. It's strange. They're going on about going down rabbit holes. They're the one that have gone down rabbit holes. They just lost touch with the mass of working class people in this country. They're just completely out of touch. But you've got a Labour Party who aren't Labour. You've got a Tory Party who are anything but Conservative. You know, no one voted for the Tories for their agreed agenda or for inflation or for tax rises. That's not Conservative.
No, so we've kind of got two parties that they're almost becoming both social democrats, sort of battling for that centre ground space.
John Lennon used to say there's an inch of difference between Labour and Tories, and it's in that inch we live. But I don't think there's an inch of difference anymore. I just think they're the same animal. So that's why you've got people like Reform Party or Social Democrats. You just think, well, OK, there is some choice out there at the moment, not enough promotion for those parties.
Garry, you've written about social affairs and current affairs over the years. Putin, Ukraine, how do you feel about things?
Like everyone else, Nigel, it's heartbreaking to watch. You're just seeing war crimes happening before your eyes. You're seeing brutality. You're seeing lies. You're seeing the shelling of maternity hospitals, the shelling of refugees. It's disgusting. It really is. And the only positive coming out of it for Britain and the West is it might wake us up and make us wake up and realise how complacent we've been. Because Putin's looked at us and thought, they've had it. Look at that. Who's their leader? Joe Biden, Sleepy Joe. You know, we're so wrapped up in self-doubt and vanity and all this self-loathing in the West now that we've lost track of who we are. And we've also now been reminded how precious our freedoms are and how perilous it can be, how quickly that could go. Just takes one lunatic and we lose all of it.
Yeah.
So the things we're not even fighting for anymore, like free speech, like free expression, free assembly, all these things we need to keep fighting for. Because the Ukrainians are dying for it.
Yeah, it's difficult not to admire much of what we see from Ukrainian men, 70-year-old men, picking up rifles, defending their land.
Defending their land, defending their people.
Yeah, I mean, Ukraine is corrupt. Ukraine's got huge problems, but that's not the point. No. Do you think we would do that again if we were threatened?
Do you know, I was thinking about that the other day. You'd like to think so, but we haven't got access. Apart from anything else, we haven't got access to the weapons that they've got.
Well, we could get them. We could get them.
But have we? I think there are some people still who've got that lion heart in this country. There are still some of those people. But you see now, I think too many of us, too many kids are still teenagers in their mid-20s. We don't let people grow up anymore. It's just like an extended adolescence. And they're all wrapped up in social media, all wrapped up in vanity and...
So why don't we get them reading more novels?
There you go.
Novels. Like
lovely
the Harry Tyler crime, Pulp Fiction.
Thank you very much.
Tell us about your latest book, Garry.
I've just published the fourth in the series of the Harry Tyler books, which a reviewer very kindly suggested that he was almost as hard as Jack Reacher, but a lot roundier. He's an undercover copper, and in the latest book, he goes undercover with an East End rock band who are actually a front for a criminal gang. So this is his latest challenge. But we got very close to doing a film. Very close.
Good. Keep going, Garry, and you'll get it.
Well,
listen, thank you for joining me.
Pleasure.
For Talking Pints. That was Garry Bushell.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
It's that time of day, thank goodness. It's Talking Pints. I'm here with photojournalist and war reporter Mike Yardley, who's been out to Afghanistan, Syria, Lebanon. He's also a very keen sporting shot. Let's see him in action.
We're on a clay pigeon shooting range, and you may be asking, why is that relevant to the project? Well, because to shoot a clay pigeon, you've got to shoot ahead of the target to hit it.
Well, there we go. Mike Yardley, welcome to Talking Pints.
Well, I think it's fashionable to say thank you for having me, but it's great to
Well, it's very good to see you here. And we will get to shooting. And I shoot a little bit, and I'm aware of just how difficult it is to even say that these days. You know, the sort of anti-gun feeling is very, very strong. Mike, let's talk a bit about your career. You know, you've been in the army, you've been a photojournalist, you've been to some of the most horrendous war zones of the 1980s and the 1990s. How does this situation in Ukraine look to you?
All of this is coloured a bit from my own personal experience. As a small kid, I was in the States during the Cuban Missile Crisis. I saw the TV ads, you know, in case of nuclear attack. I was a young officer on the border with East Germany. And, you know, one day when I was duty officer, I thought the balloon was going up. In fact, it wasn't. But I think of all this stuff within that context. I think what's happening in Ukraine is very sad. I helped Solidarity with their struggle in Poland. I smuggled ink to the printing presses in Gdansk. And
that must have been a fascinating period.
Oh, fascinating, absolutely. And, you know, Russian tanks, no thanks, the badges that people had. And
Walesa, this extraordinary figure.
Unbelievable, yeah.
Almost came from nowhere.
Yeah, proper popular politics, people power, on an extraordinary scale, but not quite as we saw it on the Western media. I mean, you know, there were quite a few socialists within that Solidarity movement, a lot of unionists. It wasn't quite what the British and Western media were telling us, and, you know, which was convenient to maybe Thatcher at the time or whoever. And I always feel that with the news, having reported on news and having actually been at these places and had foreign news networks trying to sex up their coverage sometimes. I'm always very aware of that. I never quite believe.
Do you mean that President Zelensky may not be the second coming?
Yeah, he may not be the second.
I mean,
yeah, quite.
We obviously feel great sympathy.
And a Ukrainian, a very intelligent Ukrainian lady who's a professor in the UK was telling me the other day that we're not doing the Ukraine any favours by having, you know, this mono news. You know, Zelensky hero, Putin bad. There are subtleties which we should discuss. You know, subtleties about the eastern regions and stuff like this. That said, I've been fighting off all sorts of people who appear to be Russian assets online, and that's another deal too. I mean, we are manipulated. We're manipulated by all sides in war.
Yeah. I mean, look, Ukraine is a very corrupt country with all sorts of problems. But I suppose my feeling is that what Putin has ultimately done is to invoke, flawed though it is, to go into a sovereign territory, and that is at the heart of the problem today.
It is appalling. Brutal Russian forces are attacking innocent Ukrainian citizens. There are some grey areas. There's some interesting old history, which doesn't get discussed really on the 10 o'clock news, and we ought to discuss that. We ought to think about it. And of course, Ukraine had lots of problems before this started. You know, it's not an advanced, you know, democracy as we are. It's a democracy, but it's a democracy that's got lots of issues and problems.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And all of that sort of stuff. But meantime, it worries me that I see a very different sort of deal going on social media, for example, than I do on the news. Now, some of the social media veers to extremes. But the reason that it veers to extremes, I suspect, and I did have 70-odd thousand people following me, now it's about 65,000 because I spoke up about it, is because people, well, I think they don't like to feel controlled. And when they feel controlled, perhaps they veer towards extremes in despair or whatever. That is a problem that we face.
Now, in your days, going out to all these Lebanon and places that must have been hellholes at the time, and kidnap risk and...
Well, I got seized in Beirut. You know, I was working for Time as a snapper, Time, the American magazine, and I was going down, I think it was Al Hamra, and suddenly I had all these AK muzzles pointing in my head, and somebody saying, Americani, Americani, are you American or American? I was saying, la la la, Inglesi, Inglesi. And so this went on, and a guy said, are you English? And I said, yeah, I'm English. And he said, oh, I was a student in London. Are you from the Times? And I said, and he said, my friends want to take you away. And they did take me away. And very luckily, I got taken to another place, to some sort of, I don't think you'd call it a safe house, but it was a tragic situation because there was an elderly Jewish man in this suburban part of Beirut crying on the pavement because they were ransacking his house. I then went into the house, and the younger guys, I think, wanted to do me in. And the picture, you may have shown it, I don't know. And somehow I managed to talk my way out of it. And I said to this guy, I said, what's going to happen to you? He said, oh, I'm going to get killed soon. I mean, that's the sort of reality you face. Afghanistan, by the way, compared to Lebanon, was quite good fun. I mean, I went in there, you know, you do stupid stuff when you're young. I went in 3 times across the border clandestinely to go in with a Mujahideen. A friend of mine was a Mujahideen commander, and he actually fell down a mountainside on the way to a mission, and I actually lowered myself down to him on a rope, reduced his dislocated knee, you know, stuck an injection of Valium into him, amongst other things, and splintered his leg to an old Enfield rifle. We pulled him up the hill again and went in to rocket the Russian advised base. But I never carried, this is a very important point, I never carried arms against the Russians, and nor would I. I was there to report. I had friends, and when a friend got injured, I put him back together. But I'm always a little bit wary. You know, that wasn't my place.
And were you guilty? I mean, were you guilty as a photographer? Were you guilty in some ways of projecting an image of what was happening in that war that you thought people ought to see?
I've always been trying to pursue the cause of freedom, whether it was solidarity, whether it was Afghanistan. So I don't think I feel guilty for that. I did notice that the media love death and destruction. What they call on the news desks in London and New York, bang, bang. Have you any bang, bang? Because that's what turns them on. And I didn't generally produce bang, bang, a bit of it, but I like the human story. And not the sort of schmaltzy chocolate box human story that I sometimes see on the evening news, the real human story. So that's what I was pursuing.
You talked about being a young officer on the border with East Germany, and you thought the balloon might be going up, but it wasn't. Is there a danger in Ukraine that by accident?
There's a huge danger of escalation. I mean, just going back to that situation in Germany, I can remember, I'm not even sure what I'm allowed to say or not, but something coming through on a secure system, and I thought the balloon was going up. I was the duty officer, and I looked at the duty corporal who was there, and we looked at each other and thought of, oh, F.
If this is it, this is it. Yeah, I guess.
And then the machine broke down as this was coming through. And we sort of looked at each other, and I said, well, what do we do next? And being a good British Army soldier, he applied a size 9 DMS boot to this very high-tech then piece of kit, and it burst back into life. And we discovered, in fact, it wasn't. It was just some sort of drill. But that feeling, it's like the feeling of being taken. These are feelings that not everybody has had. It's a very strange thing. I suppose a privilege to have survived them.
But it shows you what can go wrong, doesn't it? Then?
Oh, it does.
In a situation where someone thinks something's happening and it's not, and they react in a certain way, and you could have reacted.
And here is the point as well. These are not just human systems anymore. There's a computer element, algorithms. Things can go wrong. This could get out of hand, you know, not because of any human input, but just because something went wrong with the systems. That is frightening, and it's already escalated too far. And I think what we should be doing is more or less what we are doing. You know, send in the anti-tank weapons, send in the anti-aircraft weapons. No aeroplanes, don't escalate it. Sanctions can go too far. The Russian people are not our enemy. We don't want to give the impression to them. We don't want to make the mistake of Versailles in overdoing it. You know, I think we're doing it about right. I think the balance is about right, but we may just be going over the edge.
Banning Tchaikovsky next Friday.
Well, that is crazy, isn't it?
Cardiff.
Yeah,
I mean,
or Dostoevsky. I mean,
well, where does it start?
Yeah, quite. Where does it start?
On a different note, you are a great sporting shot, and we saw you there hitting clays.
But I'm going fishing tomorrow.
Good.
Going on the Thames.
I thoroughly approve of all of this, of course, because I shoot, and
you must come down if you want.
No, I will. Thank you. Yeah. There we are. It's working out well this week. But you know, Dunblane was absolutely ghastly in every way. What happened in Dunblane?
Dunblane was fascinating because there was a campaign to ban sporting handguns, which I think was probably covertly backed by the Labour Party and others, and we never really saw quite who was backing it. There was total blanket media coverage of it. And the poor people that were left, who were sporting shooters, felt that they were being made culpable for one evil man's actions. And I ended up starting with a man called Albie Fox, something called the Sportsmen's Association. We took 20-odd thousand people to Trafalgar Square. We had some huge rallies and marches. Arguably, they led on then later to the countryside events that I think you probably attended. Many people did. I mean, I was taking out full-page ads in the national heavy newspapers, but it all to no effect. It all got banned. And was it the right thing to do? I don't know. When I look at it now, I have some doubts because armed crime has continued to spiral, but never really involving the weapons that, you know, with the very, very odd exception that are privately owned. You know, it's 99% a problem of the drug trade and enforcing the turf of drug gangsters.
Yeah, no, I mean, let's face it, gun crime in Britain's cities went up.
Quite.
After the ban came in.
It did, and it was a great injustice to those people.
I mean, look, Mike, I argued at the time that for the British Olympic team to have to go to Calais to
practice was nuts.
Firing with a handgun was absolutely crazy.
Absolutely
this
nuts.
could be done safely in a club environment.
Yeah.
But don't you feel that it's moving on now? Don't you feel that even, say, pheasant shooting, for argument's sake, which for many parts of the rural economy is a really important part of their life for those months?
I think they're salami slicing the shooting sports now. Yeah. And most of us who are involved in them are very concerned about the future. And let me just say this, because this is the real point. Shooting's great. It's a great social sport. It provides a lot of very, very positive hobby and sport to many thousands, nearly 1 million, in fact, more than 1 million people who do it. Something like, I don't know, 600,000 or 700,000 are licensed. And it's a positive. And often the media, and I had great ructions with the BBC on this, and it cost me my career as a security specialist. I had a phone call from someone who was probably number 3 in BBC News then, who said if I kept pushing this stuff, quote unquote, the phone's not going to ring so often. And that really did do me in with the BBC.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think shooting's really in trouble.
Yeah.
There is very, very big money. I had PETA on the other day on the programme, and they want to ban everything.
I mean, that's the problem. We live in a society where the big state gets ever bigger and more stuff gets banned. And meantime, the irony of this is you can work people up to ban anything if you control the media. But I think most people don't really feel that they have any power now. And this was perhaps part of that agenda where people, I mean, I know you're very into people power. I'm very into people power. I think ordinary people lack a voice.
Thank you for joining me on Talking Pints.
Cheers. Thank you.
Looking ahead to this evening's weather, and the UK is looking dry and clear, though turning chilly and remaining windy in the west. Let's take a look at the details. After a sunny but windy day in the southwest this evening, winds will ease, but it will turn a little cloudier across the south, clearer in the north, but feeling cooler. In the southeast, it will be a breezy end to the day, but cloudless skies will continue, still feeling cooler in the breeze along the coast. Moving over to South Wales, where we can expect this evening to be dry and fine, but breezy still and chilly off sunset. Now moving north to the Midlands, tonight will be dry with clear skies, though over the hills and in the east a fresh breeze will continue to bring a colder feel. Moving on to northeast England now, breezy on the hills this evening, but clear and dry for all. There could be the odd spot of fog in the valleys, and it will continue to feel cold. Across southern Scotland, it will also be a clear and dry night with the odd misty patch. However, over hills it will turn increasingly windy this evening. Finally, to Northern Ireland, a windy but clear evening. So if you are planning on enjoying the last of the sunshine here, you'll likely need a layer or two. For many, it will remain clear overnight with a touch of frost by the morning, but cloud will increase in some western areas. And that is how the weather is shaping up overnight into tomorrow morning.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not